Okay, so for today, we're gonna finish defensive adaptations. And then we are going to do a Mentimeter. And then we'll start amphibian reproduction. So let's see. I assume, yeah, everybody's here that's going on the field trip tomorrow. Remember, we'll meet at noon in the parking lot. Beverly, why don't you meet about 5-10 minutes early and then we'll get the boots and things.
Okay.
But it looks like it's gonna be like in the seventies today and maybe tomorrow too. So I'm optimistic. This is actually, I went back and looked at old dates. And this is about a week earlier than we normally go, but I'm still optimistic.
It's really warm yesterday. It was like a really good temperature.
Yeah, I think that's what we want to pull them out. And hopefully we'll get to hear the frogs calling and see the lizards and run into a leopard frog or two. If on your waders, make sure they're clean, okay? There's always a chance of transferring disease, particularly well, ranavirus, but also the chytrid fungus is what people worry about. And so we wouldn't want to bring, if you've been at some other wetland, you've got muddy, dirty boots, wash them all off. Ideally, what you do is you soak them or spray them with a 10% bleach solution, but if your waders have been dry, the fungus can't live on them if they've been stored dry for a while. But you don't want any mud or any dirt on them, so if they're dirty, wash them off before you bring them.
Yeah, cause I have some from home. They haven't been used in several months, but I have some.
As long as they were clean and stored dry, then they're
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. Okay, Monday, do you guys wanna do a lab exam, a review session for lab 3?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Is the exam, it's Tuesday? Night?
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's
Oh,
for
okay.
snakes,
What's that?
crocodiles.
Snakes and crocodiles. Yeah. And all the review materials are up. Study guides for lab exam 3A and B. PowerPoint, Snakes of Idaho review, that was the thing that Alexa Heinrich put together. And then there's a practice lab exam too. I think there's one question. There might be, I modified on the review sheets. To added some snake subfamilies. So, but we'll talk about that on Tuesday. And then I've been trying to figure out what to do about, oh, here's one other thing. In 2020, when we were having trouble with the COVID, we couldn't go on field trips. So I put together a bunch of slides from past field trips to McCammon Pond and O'Neill. If you want to look at those before you go tomorrow, it'll give you an idea of what we might see. Or if you can't go on the field trip, but you'd like to know what it was like, or what those field trips are like, you can go and look at that. The other thing is, this is what I'd want to do for the final, I think we'll just put everything together in the final lecture exam. And I thought to make it manageable, and instead of having you just, well, either memorizing, which I don't do much anymore, or just having you kind of look up the answers, I'd have something that was a little more challenging and synthetic.
Oh, check the chat, see.
Oh, you can't, oh, what's going on? That was where it was set. Here, let me go back so you can see the previous. So, anyway, here's the, thing on the Moodle page for the virtual field trip. And then here's the things that are on the Moodle page for the review. They're next week. You'd have to jump forward to next week to see those. And move them. So here's my idea for the take-home lecture exam. Let me read this to you. You get to choose a Idaho herp species. And then for that species, I want you to think through all the stuff that we've covered about, the biology in this class, like temperature relationships, water relationships, gas exchange, circulation, locomotion, movements, feeding, defense, reproduction, and conservation. And so, and then, so put together, short answers for all of these are all topics that we've covered in lecture. And you can use your lecture notes, you can use the textbook, you can, if you wanted to go to the literature, you could do that. You could do it like a Google search. You can talk among yourselves if you have personal experience with these animals in the field. Or if you're not able to find something, you can just speculate on it. And some things are not going to be applicable to each species too, so you can do that. But, for example, like for respiratory surfaces, if you're talking about a frog, what respiratory surfaces are they going to use during their lifetime? Okay, if you're talking about a reptile, it's going to be different, right? They're not ever going to use gills, and they're seldom going to use the skin. So this is it. The one restriction on this, but you can talk among yourselves and everything, but everybody's going to have to choose a different species.
Do
Okay.
we tell you what we're picking ahead of time?
You will have to tell me, and the first person that chooses that species and emails me and tells me, then you get it. Things like leopard frogs and garter snakes have lots of information available to them. If you choose a ground snake, you're going to have to think a lot more about it than look up answers. Okay. Anyway, that's that. And then what we'll do for, this is a lot of material. So when I'm computing final grades, what I'll do is I'll just weight the exam I've had 3 lecture exams. I'll weight it by how much time we spend on it in lecture. Okay. Any questions? I will ask you in the Menti if you like this idea. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so let's finish defense. I think I was talking to Dean, I was saying this is one of my favorite lectures, just because there's so many cool things that these animals do, and it's really pretty surprising, everything they do. So I think this is where we
that's what
left off. I have not read anything that actually says that there's toxins or with this tail display in the ringneck snakes, but I suspect that it's at the very least that's with the musk and an irritant, something like that. And then we got to see that cool video of the blood shooting out of the eye. I didn't realize it was that much blood that they actually lost. And then this was on our trip. This was over at Bruneau Dunes. We used to camp there. We used to do a 2-day field trip. And then we would drive the roads at night. And we found 2 long-nosed snakes out that night. The only long-nosed snakes I've ever seen in the field were on that field trip. Okay, here's some amazing ones. Now, this is this category that's, it's part of engagement, and it's called offensive defense. And so these are examples of toxic secretions from the skin glands of amphibians. And remember that, you know, things like, well, toads have the big parotid glands. And I don't know if I told you this, but, you know, they will put their, when you encounter a toad in the field, sometimes you'll see them bend over like this. And what we think they're doing is actually presenting those parotid glands. You know, and they may actually do some like that, like headbutting and things too. There's tail lashing, undulation, or shedding of tails, but there's toxins involved in that. And then the spiny newts, well, this one, I'm not sure. This is a salamandrid. These are all salamandrids, so they're newts. This one actually squirts the toxin out in a fluid. And that they photographed that, you're seeing it. So that's not one of ours in North America. This, I think these are both the same species, just different color variants, I think, or closely related. But these spiny newts, their ribs, the poison glands are situated over the tips of the ribs. So like if an animal bit that or something, it could punch the rib through through the toxin and actually introduce it into the predator. This is a western toad. I was photographing this up in Grand Teton National Park. We had a little lab photo studio set up there, and I was photographing them. But this is not a happy toad. Okay, can you see this white material coming out? Yeah, often you'll see it even more up here in the parotid glands, but that's the toxin.
They have it on their legs.
They have all those places all those bumps you see there, those are all poison glands, concentrations. This is just the largest concentration of poison glands, but all of these bumps here. Now, normally when I see it coming out of these little pores here, but for this guy, it was just coming out all over elsewhere, but I didn't see it here. Maybe looks like there might be some. Yeah, there's some coming out of this parotid gland here, some up front here, maybe a little bit right there. But that's got the bufotoxin in it. That's will make the predators sick, or most predators sick. So if you're handling a toad and it's exuding, you know, a white material like that, you're really upsetting it. So we talked about toxic secretions in the skin glands of amphibians, and then some of these. We had a picture here of a dendrobatid. So in fact, that was one on our field trip. That was one of them there. And then it turns out that the sea snakes, if they're eaten by other animals like a shark, that'll sicken or kill the shark. And when they were proposing that sea level canal across Panama, I think it was back in the 60s and 70s, the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama did studies on this. And they introduced sea snakes to sharks from the Pacific and sharks from the Caribbean. And the sharks from the Caribbean had been separated, you know, from sea snakes for like, I think 20 million years. And they'd lost their knowledge or their ability to sense that. And they would eat the sea snakes and die or get sick, where the ones in the Pacific knew to leave them alone. So don't eat sea snakes. Offensive defense, so some animals have odoriferous glandular secretions like kinosternid turtles. And so do many snakes have musk glands. There's cloacal discharge. So garter snakes and water snakes are probably the most notorious for this. Have any of you picked up a garter snake and had the experience of being covered in musk and feces
Yeah.
and uric acid? Yeah, and it can smell pretty bad and it's hard to get off too. There's tail lashing, that like, iguanids and, green iguanas are especially like that. If you grab a green iguana, they can, so they'll start slashing or, lashing their tail around. If it hits you like on the face or something, it hurts. And, monitors are similar to that. And then some of the big lizards can really claw too. Tegus and varanids have really sharp, powerful claws. And they could really open a significant wound on you. I met a photographer for the Bronx Zoo. This was back in the 60s. I met him. And he was using, I think, a 4x5 view camera or a press camera. And he was photographing, they'd gotten Komodo dragons in at the Bronx Zoo. And he was photographing them. He had his camera on a tripod. And the monitors were not aggressive, but one of them, I guess the big male was coming by and it put its one paw on the, wall, and it put the other on the photographer's leg to kind of pull himself past him. And before that happened, the keeper said, "Get out of there," but he wanted to get that shot, so he waited that extra minute to take the picture, and the monitor pulled itself through, was not trying to hurt him, but just pulling himself through and sliced open his leg, and he needed 55 stitches
Oh my gosh.
to open it up.
How big was it monitored?
I don't know, but it was probably 5, 6 feet long, something like that. It was probably a pretty good sized animal, probably over 100 pounds. And I used to feed savanna monitors rats at the zoo. And they'd grab them, but then they'd often use their claws, to swipe at them. And they could just open them up and just a swipe of the claw. I mean, it was really, I mean, those are animals that you don't want to, if you had to restrain and handle the tegu, be really careful about its hind limbs. You want to hold them down. And of course, all kinds of them will bite. Things like snapping turtles can bite quite hard, but a lot of them, and obviously venomous snakes, that biting is really serious. So here's spitting. This is a spitting cobra. This is a photograph from the Time Life series on reptiles. And the snake strikes, and as it strikes, it compresses the venom glands and it forces the venom out. And then I think the movement of the head projects it probably even more. But I saw a talk one time that they had taken scanning electron micrographs of the teeth, and the teeth of spitting cobras are rifled. Okay, so they have rifling in a gun, that it's a spiraling within the barrel that keeps the bullet going straight. And spitting cobra things had rifling. I just thought that was the coolest thing. And I hadn't appreciated how much the venom So what kind of evolution would that represent then?
Convergent.
Convergence, yeah, convergent evolution. Um. When I worked at the reptile gardens, whenever I handled the spinning cobra, I'd have to put goggles on. Ours didn't aim very well, though. He always pulled to the right when he spit. And, oh, a long time ago, when they would ship these animals like from Africa over to the zoos in the United States, sometimes they didn't ship them very well. And our curator told me a story when he was a keeper there, they were opening a crate of snakes that had been shipped from Africa, and they hadn't put them in snake bags. And so they were just in the crate. And one of the keepers opened it and was peeling it apart, and he got spinning cobra caught him right in the eyes. And I think that could actually kill you. Cause it'd be absorbed by the membranes there. They said they washed his eyes out immediately, but it really impaired his vision. That he lost a lot of his dark vision. He said he couldn't read in dim light, he couldn't read anymore because of the damage it did to his eyes. And then these are called morphological adaptations, morphological adjuncts. So turtle shells are a great example. And box turtles are really probably the ultimate example of this. Because they, have the shells where the front and the back of the plastron are hinged. And they can fold it up like that. You know about the horned lizards have spines. And so do the mollusk lizards, which are the gamete equivalent of a horned lizard. Rattles are example of morphological adjunct. Glands, toe fringes, body folds for gliding, frailty of skins. We talked about this, didn't we?
Think so.
Yeah, with some of these geckos, their skin is very delicate. If a predator grabs them, the skin just comes off. It's sort of like the tearaway jerseys they used to have in the NFL. And we've talked about apparent increase in body size, like inflation. And then color patterns would be considered a morphological character too. Now, here's a very interesting one. This is mimicry. And you have one animal that's noxious or toxic. And then you have another species that isn't noxious, but it resembles the noxious model. Okay, so there's this model that's unpalatable, and it has some kind of warning coloration that tells a predator, like a dendrobatid frog, right? Tells a predator, don't eat me. And then there'll be another species that looks similar, may not have the noxious properties, but it benefits from the predator thinking, boy, I better not eat that one. Okay. So there's two types of mimicry. There's called Batesian mimicry and Mullerian mimicry. And in Batesian mimicry, the mimic shares signals similar to the model, but does not have the attribute. So it's one of them's palatable, the other species is not. In Mullerian mimicry, you have two species that are both have the noxious properties, and so they kind of reinforce one another. So here's some examples of mimicry. So redback salamanders are not particularly noxious, but the red eft, here's the F stage of the eastern newt, is very noxious. So that's an example of what Batesian mimicry. Coral snakes, scarlet snakes, and scarlet king snakes have a very similar pattern, but only the coral snakes are venomous. But there's lots of coral snakes, okay? I mean, there's many species of coral snakes, like down in Central America. And then those could be considered Mullerian mimics because they're both, or they're multiple species that are toxic.
So Batesian is like one species looking like another species, and Valerian is just everybody sharing the same color palette.
Well, in all cases, they look like each other, both Batesian and Mullerian, but in Batesian mimicry, one of them's noxious or unpalatable and the other isn't. So one's getting a free ride. In Mullerian mimicry, you have multiple species that are kind of reinforcing each other. They're all unpalatable.
Like a wasp and a bee.
Yeah, yeah. And then when I was taking herpetology, it was described that rattlesnake, the gopher snake similarity in behavior was considered mimicry of rattlesnakes. But I've seen criticisms of that. And and I'm not sure what's the right terminology to use, but there certainly is a similarity of behaviors in gopher snakes. And the appearance that, but mainly behavior that's similar to that of the rattlesnakes. And so to me, it does seem like they're mimicking. We've talked about this before, just mentioned it, but this idea of caudal autonomy, or basically losing your tail. So this occurs in some salamanders, the tuatara, many lizards, amphisbaenids, and some snakes. And in the lizards, there's there are fracture planes, okay, in the vertebrae. This is the tail, and these are the vertebrae here. And there's zones of weakness, fracture planes, and the tail is much easier, will break much easier. In fact, to me, it almost looks like they have the ability to break their tail at will. I mean, I don't know if they can do that with their muscles and things, but it certainly comes off easily. There's the muscles are, I guess, segmented, and then the arteries that are here have sphincter muscles, circular muscles around them. And so when that tail breaks off, they clamp down and they don't lose much blood, and hardly any blood at all. And then there are nerve ganglia, nerve cell bodies, collections of nerve cell bodies in the tail. So the tail continues to get stimulated to contract those muscles, and it'll flop around for 5 minutes after it's severed from the body. This is a side blotch lizard that we caught on a field trip, and unfortunately, that's what happened with its tail. And I have a video, I think, of a skink tail that kept going for like 5 minutes. This is not without cost. I mean, the animal saves its life, but it loses its energy. A lot of the energy is stored in the tail. And so it like for a female, she may not have enough energy to yolk up the eggs. She might have to delay reproduction. And apparently males, when they lose their tails, it influences their social status, so that they kind of drop down in the social hierarchy in the lizard world. And they may not be accepted by the females if they've lost their tails. Parental care in herps is limited, but there is some salamanders. Can you think of a salamander that has parental care? an Idaho salamander that has parental care. We actually, things like Amphiuma and stuff protect their legs.
Does parental care extend to to just protecting eggs?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay, was that some?
Idaho giant salamander, good. Okay, some frogs, the gastric brooding frog, that could be considered parental care. Crocodilians are, behaviorally, I think, most advanced of the reptiles, have the most social behavior. And they show the longest extent and the greatest extent of parental care.
In Life in Cold Blood, they were showing a caiman that had some of the most life. They cared very much about their young. like,
Yes,
To the point where, there was one female taking care of the baby of other
of others.
caiman.
Yeah, yeah. And, they will guard the net, they create nests, they'll guard the nests. And I think both sexes can be involved in helping the young out of the nest and getting them out of the eggs, actually carrying them to the water. I guess it's really something to see, like a 15-foot Nile crocodile gently pick up a baby and carry it to the water. And they may stay with the babies for a year afterwards.
I like the picture of the baby crocodile.
Oh, with all the little
Yeah,
ones
the
that,
little babies on the back.
yeah, isn't that great?
I think that's the father.
Is that the
could be
father?
wrong. It's just the father who watches the eggs. That's
Okay. There's some lizards that have parental care of the eggs. A friend of mine taught a herpetology course up at Lake Itasca, or the Itasca Field Station for the University of Minnesota. And he had his class out one day and they were turning over, I think, a board or a log, and they saw a skink with her eggs. And then later on, they came back later in the day and they turned over it and the eggs were gone. And then the next day they came back and the eggs were back. And what they do is they thermoregulate the eggs. And so they move them up under the log to warm them up. And then when it gets too hot, they move them back down into into the thing. And I don't know, if to what extent they protect against other organisms, but I think they very well might. Some snakes, like, king cobras, they nest as pairs. They create nests and the pair of king cobras will guard that nest. That would be a very, very, quite a deterrent. I mean, I've read that a king cobra actually has the potential to kill an elephant. I mean, they're really a potent animal.
okay.
Trimersurus is a species of viperrid that, a pit viper, I think, that guards the eggs. And then rattlesnakes, stay with the young for, a couple weeks, typically after they're born. The mothers do. And then there's social behavior where you have schooling behavior of tadpoles, synchronized metamorphosis of tadpoles. This happens apparently, when I was down in Panama, they were talking about this, that the metamorphosis, we were actually seeing it with synchronized breathing of these different fish, where the fish would all come up to the surface of the stream and breathe, and then they'd all go back down at the same time. But the synchronized metamorphosis is the idea that if you have thousands of them coming, metamorphosing at once, they just overwhelm the predators. Where if they came out over a period of days, that they wouldn't, the mortality would be lower or would be longer, greater. And then there's snake aggregations, hibernation and rookeries. So these are hibernating red-sided garter snakes, and that might provide them some protection. And then this is over at the orchard training area. This is near that rattlesnake den that they have there, or one of their rattlesnake dens, and we were out there on a training session. I think this was in 2016. And somebody said, hey, there's a whole bunch of snakes over here. This was a couple 100 meters away from the den. And I walked over there and was looking at them, and there were 6 big rattlesnakes that I could see there. You can see they all look pretty plump. And I'm going, what are 6 snakes not doing at the den, but they're still aggregated this time of year? And then I realized that that's a rattlesnake rookery. Those are all females, pregnant females, and they concentrate there. I visited a den of prairie rattlesnakes in Wyoming where they had found 12 pregnant females under one rock.
So they're like communally nested.
They're communally gestating their eggs, yeah, and they're called rookeries.
Oh, 'cause they give live births.
They give live birth, yeah. But there are snakes that communally nest. There are some snakes that lay eggs, but they'll lay eggs with more than one species. Anyway, you would think that 6 rattlesnakes here together would be more deterring than to a badger or a hawk or something like that than one. Okay, these are the questions I used to ask on lecture exams, but we don't have to do those. Okay. Oh, no. Okay, we got one other, we want to do a Mentimeter here. I didn't close it. Yeah, here we go. And so enter your last name. Okay, great. So I'm trying to decide whether there's enough people that want to go on a field trip. And if we do go on a field trip, what's the best day to go? Okay, so if either one is okay, that's great. A week from tomorrow is April 19th, and 2 weeks from tomorrow is April 26th.
Those are Fridays.
Those are Fridays.
Oh,
Just-
I had one day.
The
Sorry.
20th and the 27th.
Yeah, the 20th and the 27th. It's all day. We'll leave at 8 o'clock. We'll get over there about 11:30, so you have to bring a lunch. And then generally after we're there about 5 hours, people are tired and, well, and you're gonna see everything you want in 5 hours or everything you can.
You just going out in the field to go for herps.
Yeah, this is to the birds of prey area,
Ooh.
and this would be,
The one in Boise.
well, the Morley Nelson Birds of Prey area extends from Hammett over to the west, almost to Homedale. It's 55 miles along the river.
Oh, so it's.
We're actually just outside of that. We're not at the ideal, we're not at the place where you look for the golden eagles and the peregrine falcons and everything. That's generally done on the north side of the river. We're gonna be on the south side of the river. at a place called Fossil Butte. But we have the potential to see, gee, maybe most of the reptiles that occur in Idaho. I mean, we, in the past, we have seen their rattlesnakes, racers, gopher snakes, brown snakes, night snakes, and longnose snakes. I mean, I know those are there. We've seen, I may not have seen all those, but field trips have seen them
Yeah.
there. And then for lizards, we'll probably see, collared lizards. Certainly side blotched lizards, fence lizards, leopard lizards. And if we're lucky, whiptail lizards, we'll see those. And then if we're lucky, we might see horned lizards, but I don't know if horned lizards are there anymore because of the invasive grasses. But it's a good trip. And then generally we stop and get something to eat, like in Twin Falls on the way back.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, so this is great. So we have 5 people that could go on the 19th. Okay. All right. Well, that's great. So I will plan, I'll plan to do that trip. Okay,
So it's
and,
gonna be 70.
if we have 5 people, I'll have to get a vehicle from the university, because I can't fit 5 people in my van.
So I'm not 100% sure if I can go yet, but if I can drive myself. And I'm one of the 5 people up there, so.
Oh, okay. Well, you can, but gee, I mean, I'd much rather have your lab fees go to getting you there than have you pay for it yourself.
If I went there, I'd probably be spending the night with my family, because I live in Boise already.
Oh, is that right?
So, yeah, it would be kind of like a short weekend trip.
Oh, okay, so you could go
Yeah,
spend the day there and then,
I'm not sure if I will be able to go on it though.
okay, well, that's good though, but because see, if there's 4 other people, I can take 4 people in my van. But yeah, you really want a 4-wheel, what kind of vehicle do you have?
I have Jeep SUV.
Oh, okay, you're all set. Yeah, I was gonna say, if you have a regular car, you will not be able to get there. The last 2 miles would destroy your car. But that's why we have to buy a 4-wheel or rent a 4-wheel drive vehicle, or we need a 4-wheel drive vehicle. If I took like a regular car there, it would be very bad.
Yeah.
And then the motor pool would hate me. Well, they not only hate me, they charge the university a bunch of money. Okay, so this is great. This is great. Okay, what is your opinion of the proposed lecture exam format? Okay. I think that tells me what I need to know. What are 3 aspects of amphibian or reptile reproduction? So, over the next week, we're gonna be talking about amphibian and reptile reproduction. And what kinds of topics? Think of what are 3 of the possible topics that we'll be talking about. So things like fertilization, internal or external, sex determination, things like that. So I just wanted to, what comes to your mind when you think of reproductive biology? What are the kinds of topics that covers? Just to get you thinking about this. Courtship, good. Fertilization. Reproductive mode, like whether it's viviparous or oviparous. Nesting habits. Egg deposition sites would be another one. Well, that is kind of nesting. Yeah, competition for mates, parental care. Incubation. Mating rituals. It'd be things like mating systems.
Is that another way of saying mating rituals, mating systems?
Well, mating systems is like mostly male strategies, whether they're polygamous or monogamous or polyandrous, or, you know, the different types of
Okay.
female-male relationships there. Yep, okay. And I think that's it. So what I can quickly do here is pop over and I'll show you the checklist for the amphibians. There's a lot written about reproduction in your textbook. These are the chapters that have things for both amphibians and reptiles. So if you need to look stuff up, those are the parts of the book to go to. So here's the topics for amphibian reproduction. Sexual and asexual reproduction. Let's talk about hybridogenesis and gynogenesis. Breeding seasons, mating behavior and courtship, fertilization, reproductive mode, deposition sites, clutch size, how many eggs or young are produced, parental care, how sex is determined, metamorphosis, growth and attainment of sexual maturity, longevity. I throw all that stuff together, reproduction and development. Okay, so that's what we'll be talking about next week and early, and the following week. This will go into there. And then we'll have 1 or 2 lectures on conservation, and we're almost done.
Not next week, but the week after, I think is like more of the last weeks. Like, I'm just thinking about
The
that.
week after next week is finals week.
Week after, is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So will that lecture exam 3 be up on Moodle starting today, or is that gonna start next week?
Pardon, I'm sorry, I was reading a chat.
No, you're good. The lecture 3 exam with the species thing, is that gonna be starting next Monday? Or is that already up on Moodle for us to go and look at?
It's all there now. I
Okay.
put everything up there. So yeah, I figured you need, you know, you might not be able to do it on Monday, so I wanted to give you the weekend to work on it. But I mean, you've had the material, you know,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
weeks, so it's not like